Hey guys, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Becca and today I'm going to be sharing with you some series that I probably will not be finishing. So I am a completionist. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but I do very much try to continue with series that I've started, even if I did not particularly enjoy the first book or the first couple of books, and also especially if you guys do say that the series does get better. Now I have a ton of books on my own TBR, so this is probably something that I should not be doing, especially as I do tend to buy the first book in a series and then when I finished it I then continue to purchase the rest of the books in the series as I am currently up to them, instead of just hoarding them and not reading them. Back before I started booktube, I had an amazing system of making sure I completed series. I would read a book in a series, then a standalone, then the second book in that series, and then continue like that until the series was done, and then start a new one. However, that has gone by the wayside over the last few years, and now I am in the middle of a ton of series. My completionist brain absolutely hates it, and because I am a completionist, the majority of the series that I'm talking to you guys about today, I never really made a conscious effort to DNF them, but for whatever reason I just didn't continue, and now I feel like it's a little bit late to go back and try and do that. So before we get into the 8 series I'm going to be talking to you guys about today, I would like to mention that this video has once again been very kindly sponsored by the wonderful Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning platform that brings creativity and the pursuit of knowledge into your home. Skillshare have thousands of classes that cover a wide range of topics, including creative pursuits like photography and illustration, business strategy like marketing and management, and even things like productivity and minimalism. If you guys have been watching my reading vlogs, you may have noticed how I've mentioned countless times over the last few weeks that at the moment I'm getting quite overwhelmed, and for me that really does start to shut me down and stops me from being productive or motivated in any way, shape or form. At the point where I'm currently at, I am starting to get very annoyed with this and very annoyed with my own mindset when I have so much to get done. So I was so happy when I came across a class called Simple Productivity by Greg McKeown. Now this focuses on something called essentialism. I have only just started the class, so I'm not entirely sure what that is yet, but I believe that this class focuses on how to get the most out of your time, how to focus on what is essential, how to let everything else go, and how to cut out procrastination. And even though I'm only a little way into this class, I've already picked up a couple of tips that are proving useful. Skillshare is a subscription-based service, but it is extremely affordable. If you take out an annual subscription, it works out at less than $10 per month. Now, while that is extremely affordable, I do understand that taking out a subscription can be a little bit of a commitment if you are unsure whether the service is right for you. That is why I am very happy to let you guys know that the first 1,000 people who click on the link in my description box will gain 2 months completely free access to Skillshare Premium, which will give you unlimited access to each and every class that Skillshare has to offer. Over that 2 months, you can dip in and out of as many classes as you want and it will not cost you a single penny. Now Skillshare is a company that I have been working with for quite some time. I do actually use their service. They have helped me in so many different facets of my life, so I would urge you guys to do that, and the link will be right at the top of my description box for anybody who is interested in taking me up on that offer. So let us talk about some series that I'm probably not going to finish. A little part of me is dying inside making this video because I feel like as I speak it, I'm making it real. So the first series we have is The Wicked Years by Gregory Maguire. Some of you guys may be familiar with the first book in this series, which is Wicked, as this is the book that the hit musical Wicked, which I absolutely adore, is based on. Now there is a big difference between the book and the musical. The musical is very family friendly. The book is very, very dark. And they definitely removed most of those aspects to turn it into a musical while still keeping the core storyline. So this is a book that I sampled when I was way too young to read it, and I just could not make it through the text because it is so dense, and I put it down. However, after seeing the musical Wicked on the West End in 2015, I decided to pick this book up and give it a try, and I kidded myself into thinking I was enjoying it, to be honest. If you are unfamiliar with the plot of this, it is a retelling of The Wizard of Oz from the perspective of of the Wicked Witch, and it pretty much tells her life story while the narrative of the Wizard of Oz is running in the background of this. So we don't really focus on Dorothy, but we do meet her at the points in the Wicked Witch's life where her life does intersect with Dorothy's. Now, the thing that I found about Gregory Maguire is that I absolutely love his concepts. He does very dark retellings of fairy tales, often from the perspective of a villain or a side character. However, his writing is just incredibly dense and overworked, and it makes his books incredibly difficult to get through. Now, when I started reading this series, I read Wicked, I read the sequel Son of a Witch, which I actually preferred to Wicked. I believe that I lied a little bit when I read this and said that I enjoyed this one because I thought I just wasn't clever enough to understand it. However, now that I've read a whole ton more books, I realised that Gregory Maguire's writing style is just difficult. However, I did enjoy Son of a Witch. Bearing in mind I read this series 5 years ago, the paperbacks in this series are £10 each, and at the time that was a lot. At the time, I don't even think I had a job. I think it was around the time I just finished uni, and I either didn't have a job or I was working part-time, so the remaining 2 books in this series were definitely outside of my price range. I have since purchased the 3rd book in this series, Lion Among Men, secondhand. However, at this point I would now have to go back and reread the entire thing to be able to get to those last 2 books, and the thought of it is just exhausting. Like, the thought of rereading these 2 books makes me want to cry, to be honest. It is a series that I would like to complete someday, but I'm definitely in no hurry to do so because, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I have hundreds and hundreds of books. So rereading this one, which I'm pretty sure looking back on it I didn't actually love, it's not really the top of my priority list. Next up, we have 2 series with very similar stories. Now, the first one is Snow Like Ashes by Sarah Rosh. I could not even tell you at this point what this is about. I read the first 2 books in this series probably the same year that the 2nd book was released. Not even sure when that was, maybe around 2016. This is a young adult fantasy story that has an absolutely stunning cover. I do own the first 2 books in hardback, however I lent them to my best friend years ago and I don't even care enough to ask him to prioritize them so I can have them back. But this follows a girl. It's kind of similar to Throne of Glass in the origin of the story. I believe that there's some slave mines and the majority of her kingdom have been taken into slavery, and her friend, who is the king, or would be the king if they still had a kingdom, are on the run. They're in hiding with a group of older people who are kind of like their advisors, I think. And this world is based on seasons, so all of the different kingdoms are a different season, and I think the main characters are from the Winter Kingdom. The first 2 books in this series as a whole was just completely average to me. I remember absolutely nothing about them now. I think I gave them 3 or 4 stars, but back in the day I was in no way strict with my rating system and would just give books whatever rating just came off the top of my head at the time. However, I would have probably continued with that series and read the last book if it had been published at the time. By the time it came around to the last book being published, I had pretty much lost any of the very little interest that I had in it to start off with, and so I never completed it, and to be honest I don't think I ever will. Now, as I mentioned, there is another series I've done this with, and that is The Sin Eater's Daughter by Melinda Salisbury. Now, if you thought I couldn't tell you much about Snow Like Ashes, I can literally tell you nothing about this book. I think the main character eats people's sins, and I think that is something to do with a funeral rite where before somebody is laid to rest, they are laid in their coffin, and every type of food represents a different sin that the person has committed, and the food has to be eaten before they can cross to the afterlife. Our main character is the daughter of a sin eater, and she has been taken into the palace because she has some sort of magical power that they find useful. That is all I remember about this. Once again, I read the first 2 books in the series, but the 3rd one, which I do actually own, was not published at the time that I read the first 2 books. The first 2 books in this series do follow characters from a different perspective, and now that I'm thinking about this series, I think there's quite a nice betrayal plotline in here, but overall the books were average. They did not stick with me, so by the time it came to the 3rd book being published, all of my interest was gone. A series that I started, will not be finishing, and honestly cannot even tell you how far I got, is the Walking Dead graphic novel series. Now, I loved The Walking Dead. The Walking Dead was my favorite show for a very long time. A lot of people stuck with it, and then it got to a certain point and everybody just started to tail off, and I stuck with it for longer than anybody else did, you know. I don't know what season they're up to now, but I pretty much stopped reading the comic in exactly the same place in the narrative that I stopped watching the show, and I think it's season 9 or 10 of the show. It's the point where the skinwalkers come into the plot. Now, when I was reading the comics, I was reading half a volume in between every book I read, just to break it up and also make it through this enormous graphic novel series. If you guys are unfamiliar with The Walking Dead, it is a zombie series that follows a man called Rick Grimes who wakes up from a coma to find out that there has been a zombie apocalypse while he was unconscious. The narrative is quite an interesting one because it does not follow the cause of the zombie apocalypse. It's about survival. It is about a group of characters surviving in the face of this apocalypse, what it means to be human at this time, how you can lose your humanity, how you have to keep hold of it when the world has pretty much gone to shit. And as you can imagine, it is quite high stakes. As we're in a zombie apocalypse, your favorite character can die at any moment. Now, the reason that I stopped reading the comics is because I caught up to where I was up to in the show, and I believe that I caught up to the narrative of the show around the time that Negan stopped being the antagonist because of all those events that happened. So I did continue on with the comics after that, up until the Skinwalker characters were introduced, and at that time the new season of The Walking Dead came on television, and I realized that I was spoiling myself for major plot points. Even though the narratives do diverge quite a bit, there were key character deaths that were the same in both the comic and the show. So I decided to stop reading the comic so I would stop spoiling myself for the show. I have since stopped watching the show because they got rid of every character that I cared about in one way or another, and I just could not be bothered anymore. So it's unlikely that I will go back to the comic series as well, especially as I do prefer the show over the comic. Next up, we have a virtual reality sci-fi, and that is Otherworld by Jason Segel and is it Kirsten Miller or somebody like that. I got this book out from the library. I have only read the first book and I did enjoy it. It was after I'd read Ready Player One and I wanted more of the same, and while this is a young adult sci-fi, so it's not quite as detailed as Ready Player One, I did enjoy a lot of elements to it and how it related to gaming, because from what I can remember in this series, we follow a cast of characters who are in this virtual world. It's like it's a video game, like an RPG virtual video game, and something happens and there's conflict while they're in there. I didn't think the writing was great, but overall I liked it. However, I did not like it enough to buy it, and my library did not get the second book in. Next up, we have one that may be a little bit polarizing, and that is Furyborn by Claire Legrand. I was so hyped to read this when it was first released. Once again, can't tell you much about it. I think I remember that it follows two queens in two separate time periods, but this book just really did not hold my attention at all. Once again, I believe I rated it 4 stars, definitely more like a 2 or a 3-star rating, but I liked some of the theory behind what was going on. But considering that these people are in 2 time zones, I think they're at least 200 years apart, I just did not see the difference because they were both very much the same. It was very much a high fantasy world, and in one perspective it was kind of more like, let's say, The Witcher vibes of high fantasy period, and in the other one it was more like King Arthur type high fantasy time period, and they just did not feel different enough. I did not feel like there was enough advancements between the different time periods. I liked a couple of the romance plot lines that were going on. I couldn't stand one of them. I really didn't like Riel, and I don't know how I just remembered her name actually. Wow, yeah, she's called Riel. And then the other one was called Eliana. I did prefer Eliana's perspective. I do think the general consensus on this is that most people prefer Riel, whereas I was the complete opposite way around. But even when I was reading this, it just was not holding my attention or making any sense to me. I did originally plan on continuing and reading the next book in this series, which I believe is called Kingsbane. However, a couple of years have passed now and my current desire to continue is practically non-existent. The series that inspired this entire video is Once and Future by Amy Rose Capetta and Corey McCarthy. I made a video last month called Hype Books I Won't Be Reading, reading, and I did include the sequel in that video and asked you guys if you wanted me to make this one, because this series is probably a better fit for this style of video. So this series is a young adult sci-fi retelling of Arthurian legend, where we follow a girl who is the latest in a long line of King Arthur reincarnations. The reason that there have been so many reincarnations of King Arthur is that in the original legend of King Arthur, Arthur never completed his purpose, and so he has been reincarnated over and over again all the way into this science fiction future until he can finally complete his task. Now in this book we follow the first female reincarnation, and we also follow Merlin, who all this time has been slowly aging backwards to the point where he is now a teenager trying to guard the present reincarnation of King Arthur towards their destiny. Now this series is incredibly diverse. I did enjoy the diversity in here, but nothing felt smooth. The characters did not feel smooth. The dialogue was not smooth, and this book pretty much felt like adults trying to write from a teenage perspective and doing it very badly. On the plot side of things, this is a very fast-paced, action-based book, and at the time that I read this I pretty much put it down to me not enjoying that type of story. However, I have since read Aurora Rising and Aurora Burning by J. Kristoff and did not have any of these issues in that series, so I just think it is the writing in here. There is a big disconnect between the authors and the characters, and it really shows. So I will 100% not, like I can say for sure, I won't be continuing this series, because this is one that I didn't even like enough to really want to pick up the sequel, as opposed to the others where I kind of time passed and now I can't be bothered. And then the final series we're going to talk about in this video, this is probably not the last series that could have been in this video, but I thought 8 was a good number to talk about, and this one is a book that I've read very recently. At this moment in time I am still unsure, but based on the trajectory of my interest with the previous books we've talked about today, I anticipate by the time the sequel to this book is released I will be in the same boat as I am with every other book in this video, and that is Blood Heir by Amelie Wen Zhao. So this is a loose Anastasia retelling, although that is debatable, that follows a girl called Anastasia who has run away from her kingdom because she has been accused of killing her father. This book starts out where she is breaking a notorious criminal out of jail so that he can help her find the man that she knows is responsible for the death of her father, so that eventually she can go back home. So these two strike up a bargain. He will help her find the man she's looking for, and after that she will use her magical ability to manipulate people's blood to help him get revenge on all of the people who have wronged him. Now, like with Furyborn, this book did just really not hold my interest. I wouldn't even say that the writing was bad. There was just a big disconnect between me and this book, which meant that I could not retain any information that was given to me from this book. This could very much be a me thing. It could have just been the writing style not appealing to me, but as I said, I didn't find anything wrong with the writing style, aside from that my brain was just not absorbing anything that was happening in here. As well as that, I have seen many reviews saying that this is an Anastasia retelling. I've seen interviews with the author saying that she was heavily inspired by Anastasia Romanov, and I could just not see it in here. The only parallels I could see to Anastasia in this book is that we have a Russian or Slavic inspired setting, and the character of Ramzan pretty much mimics the character arc of Dmitri in the animated movie. Aside from that, I thought that the magic system was messy. Everything in this plot is cyclical. The entire narrative of the book is just one huge circle, and we had characters in here that were constantly switching from good to evil depending on their mood, or more accurately depending on what the plot needed them to be at any given moment. So the jury's still out on this one, but I do think that by the time we get to the end of the year and the sequel to this is released, I won't be picking it up, but we'll see. I'll probably be eating my words in November, and I'll probably end up buying it, intend to read it, and just never getting around to it. So that is it for the series that I probably will not continue. Please let me know in my comments any series that you guys will not continue. I have a feeling a lot of people are going to say Throne of Glass, which makes me sad because the origins of that series are not phenomenal, but by the time you get to the end, you know, it's been a whole journey and it's a good one. I would also just like to say a final big thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring this video, and please remember that if you would like to take me up on that offer of 2 months Skillshare Premium completely free, you will be able to find all of the information information you need in my description box. But aside from that, please don't forget to like this video if you liked it and subscribe if you want to. If you head into my description box, you will find links to my Goodreads, Instagram, and Twitter if you'd like to follow me on any of those, as well as a link to my Bookish body butter and candle website, the Instagram for that, and a 10% off discount code. But that's it from me today, guys. Bye!
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you're a go and nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.